You know, you've probably seen them on license plates, maybe state flags, but if you ever really stop to think about them, every single state in the US has an official flower. And it turns out the story behind why each one was chosen, well, it's about a whole lot more than just picking a pretty plant.
I mean, just look at the California poppy. It's so vibrant, so iconic. You see it, and you instantly think of the Golden State. But that brings up a really fascinating question, right? How can one single flower possibly represent the identity of millions and millions of different people?
And we're not just talking about California. We're talking about a nation of over 321 million people. Every state has a botanical symbol. And when you really think about it, that is a huge weight for a humble little flower to carry.
So, that's what we're going to dig into today. What story are these flowers really telling us? Are they just some nice decoration, or do they paint a much bigger picture of America's culture, its environment, and its history? Let's find out.
To get to the bottom of this, we're going to follow the clues. First, we'll look at the most popular picks to find any patterns. Then, we'll zoom in on the flowers that are totally unique to one place. After that, we'll decode the surprisingly specific titles they're given. And finally, we'll piece it all together to see what it says about America's floral identity. Okay, so our investigation starts somewhere you might not expect. We're not going to start with what makes each state different, but with our first big clue, what actually makes them similar. And that leads us to the popular picks. Yep, these are the flowers that multiple states all agreed on. And they can tell us a surprising amount about a shared culture and, some common ground. And right away, you can see that state lines don't seem to matter all that much when it comes to flowers. The violet is a favorite all the way from the Midwest to the East Coast. You've got the wild rose connecting the prairies of Iowa and North Dakota. And the apple blossom and magnolia, they tie together states that have these shared agricultural and southern identities. It's pretty cool.
So, okay, these shared flowers tell one part of the story. But if we really want to understand a state's individual identity, we've got to look at the opposite. The blooms that are completely, unmistakably tied to one single, unique landscape.
And this brings us right to our second clue, those uniquely local blooms. To really get these, we have to look at geography, the climate, the soil, the water, and how all of that shapes a state's identity. Honestly, there is no better example than Arizona's saguaro cactus blossom. It's an icon of the Sonoran Desert. It's a symbol of resilience that just couldn't represent any other place. Now, this connection is pretty obvious, but is there a way to see this pattern across the entire country? Well, it turns out there is. And the key is this, and this might surprise you, a NASA map of groundwater storage. Just forget the state lines for a second and look at the colors. The deep reds, those are the driest areas. The blues, the wettest. This map is everything. Okay, now look at this. On the left, you've got Arizona's saguaro, thriving in that deep red zone from the map. And on the right, the super lush mountain laurel, the state flower for both Connecticut and Pennsylvania. And both of those states sit right in that water-rich, deep blue region. It's undeniable. The land itself is basically telling us which flowers belong where.
But it's not just about what grows wild out there. It's also about what's grown for industry. States with really strong agricultural economies often pick a symbol that reflects that heritage. Think about the peach blossom for Delaware or the orange blossom for Florida. It just makes sense. So we've looked at shared culture and we've looked at unique geography. But there's a third clue, and it's kind of hidden in the fine print, the actual titles. Yeah, it turns out state flower isn't the only game in town. And when you start decoding these other titles, a really fascinating story emerges. So, a lot of states actually have more than one floral symbol. Alabama is a perfect example. Their official state flower is the camellia. It's this beautiful, cultivated flower that's originally from Asia. But then, way more recently, in 1999, they also named the native oak leaf hydrangea their state wildflower. That's a really clear shift towards celebrating their own local ecology. And Alabama is definitely not alone here. Oklahoma has both a floral emblem, which is mistletoe, and a separate wildflower. And Tennessee gets even more specific, with a cultivated flower, the iris, and a native wildflower, the passion flower. Believe me, these titles are not accidents. They show a lot of thought went into this. And this whole process has been unfolding for more than a century. Washington was one of the first, way back in 1892, and then there was this big wave in the early 1900s. But it kept going for decades. Rhode Island only made the violet official in 1968. And as we just saw with Alabama's 1999 decision, this is a living, breathing, evolving tradition. So, after all that, what have our clues shown us?
We've seen the popular picks, the unique geography, and those complex titles. Now it's time to weave all these threads together and see the full picture of America's floral identity.
What it all means is that state flowers are so much more than just pretty decorations. They are, in a way, a living map of the United States. A map drawn with petals and stems. They show us what we all share, what makes each place totally unique, and how our values have actually changed over time.
They're symbols of pure agricultural might, like the iconic Kansas sunflower, just this powerhouse of the plains turning its face to the sun.
They capture the soul of the wilderness, like the delicate little forget-me-not, a tiny but powerful symbol of Alaska's absolutely vast and rugged beauty.
And they celebrate a shared heritage like the apple blossom, that beautiful sign of spring that ties together the identities of states like Arkansas and Michigan.
When you put it all together, what you get is this complex tapestry, one that's woven from all these different threads of history, agriculture, shared culture, and the unique natural environment of each and every state.
And that's a good reminder that powerful symbols are literally all around us, not just in state capitals. So it leaves me with one final question for you. What are the symbols that define your community? And what story do they tell about who you are and where you come from?